Most divers don't actually have the time to go scuba diving that frequently, but if you get an air fill, how long can you actually keep that air inside of the cylinder before it starts to go funny? Hi all of you awesome scuba divers out there, welcome to the Scuba Diver Magazine channel and welcome to Askmark, our scuba diving Q&A, where I'm Mark, former dive instructor, do my best to answer your scuba diving questions. If you do have any diving questions, pop them down in the comment section underneath this video. Use this Askmark hashtag to get it featured in an up and coming video. And in the meantime, yeah, I do try and type out an answer, and the community does an awesome job of doing that as well. So thank you everyone for helping me out. But yeah, today I'm answering a question from Tim Pell 49 about how long you can keep gas inside of your cylinder before you have to use it. So Tim Pell 49 says, I recently had my cylinder hydro tested. It was filled with air. How long can you keep the air in the cylinder before you use it? Also, dive shops can drain the air and fill with Nitrox? So the first part of the question, it kind of depends what you're using it for. If you're just using it for like filling car tires and stuff, which I use for some of my cylinders, it's a lot longer, but for breathing gas, the current recommendation is just 3 months, because what can happen to gas inside of a compressed cylinder is they can start to settle, and they can also start to separate in some cases, and in some very rare cases, there have been some recorded where you can actually have carbon monoxide created inside of your cylinder without your knowledge, just because the way that it kind of settles on the inside. And if you have any contaminants, especially like moisture on the inside of your cylinder, what will happen over time is it will gradually go down and settle to its lowest point, where it's normally like vaporized and kind of in the gas. It will naturally kind of go down to the lowest point, and it can collect, and it can then create this like little drop of water, which if you're diving steel cylinders especially, can start to create rust in that area. That's one reason why it's recommended that you store cylinders upright instead of laying down on their sides, because the bottom of a cylinder is pretty thick and it's pretty tough, so a small amount of rust there isn't going to be the end of the world. However, the walls of the cylinder are relatively weak, so if you get a weak point along there where some rust is forming, it's more likely to fail, and by fail I mean fail. So store them upright, and when it's breathing gases, because you're going to be breathing it at depth under pressure, yep, 3 months really, because they don't, realistically, not much is going to happen in 3 months and it's still breathable. However, yeah, use it for, yeah, pumping up your car tires. I use it to like dust things as well. You can get little adapters for low pressure inflator hoses that you can use to release and kind of dust things. There's a little fixture to fill up your car tires. So instead of using a foot pump, you can use the compressed gas if it's no longer suitable for breathing air. If it is over that 3 months, then air fills shouldn't be that expensive, depending on where you're going. And I'd rather spend the extra time and money getting some fresh gas, as opposed to literally risking my life breathing some gas, which, yeah, sure, the contents might just be air, but hey. And after a hydro test is both the best and the worst time for your cylinder, because benefit of the doubt, I'm sure your dive center is the best and they absolutely dried out the inside, because during a hydro test you fill up your cylinder with water, which is a big no-no for steel cylinders, but during a test, yeah, we fill it with water, and then afterwards we spend a lot of time drying it out on the inside, making sure there's no rust or anything or any kind of moisture. I'm sure they did that completely thoroughly and there's no moisture left inside of the cylinder, and their compressor and all their filters is all up to date, and it's taken out all of the moisture and any contaminants. They haven't put anything nasty inside of your cylinder. So it's kind of one of those things. If they're a good dive center, you've got nothing to worry about. If they're a questionable one, yeah, Realistically, if they're a questionable dive center, they wouldn't still be around because it would have happened to someone else first. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but that is something in the back of my mind. So yeah, you know your dive center, you know whether they're trustworthy or not. You've taken your cylinders there, I'm sure they're trustworthy, but yeah, there might be some places out there that aren't. So do bear that in mind, and yeah, if your next dive isn't in like the next 3 months, use it for something else. Can you get it filled with nitrox? Yes, but they'll have to drain it first. Draining ranges from literally finding a quiet corner and opening up the valve. It gets loud, it gets quite wet because when things go from high pressure to low pressure, they tend to get cold, so any kind of moisture tends to condense on them. What was it? Something just reminded me. They told me a story about someone, and we used to have dunk tanks when we were filling up cylinders. So it's a tank of water, you put the cylinder inside of it, pre-connected to a whip, and then you fill up the cylinder. And I think they like left it alone for whatever reason, and one of the O-rings slipped, and like this block of ice formed around the valve because it was so cold, and it just froze the water around it. So yeah, that can happen. It can take quite a long time, especially if you've got a high volume cylinder. No, I say high volume, something like a 12 litre or even a 15. They can take quite a long time to fully drain. Depending on like the gas mix and their nitrox blending method, they might not need to drain it all of the way, just enough to be able to get enough pure oxygen in, or however it is to not dilute your nitrox mix. But I just call them up and just say, hey, I've got a cylinder, I've got a 12 litre 200 bar full of air, and I need whatever percent nitrox in it. Do you want me to drain it? Can you drain it? Because it can be useful for them as well. Because what you can do is you can actually bleed it into one of the banks. Sometimes you have like non-return valves. It depends on their whole setup, but sometimes it can be useful for them. It just depends on what they're using that gas for. But yeah, just ask them. They'll be able to advise you. But yeah, they would have to drain it down to a certain point, because if you've got 200 bar of air and you're trying to get like oxygen in, but the O2 tank is only at like 150 bar, it's not going to be able to pump it in. So you have to drain it down to be able to get enough oxygen in and then top it up with air. It's all a balancing act. You can't really push it. But yeah, just ask them. In worst case scenario, they'll say, oh yeah, no, we'll have to do that here. You'll have to wait a while because it can take. It depends how much noise they're willing to allow, because it does get loud when you open up one of those cylinder valves. You can actually buy, I think they called it a silencer, but it was by no means silent. It was like not a silencer, a suppressor on a rifle. It had all these baffles so that the gas would come out a bit more slowly and less organized to make it a bit quieter, but it was still pretty loud when you opened up that cylinder valve. Yeah, they'll have to drain it. It's something that you could do yourself, but yeah, it's quite noisy and you don't want to drain it all of the way, because once you get down to that like 1 and then 0 bar, a lot of cylinders will take a gasp of air at the very end, so it will be pushing the air out, and then when it's finally out, it'll suck a little bit in. You don't want it to suck any of this humid gas that we're normally breathing. You don't want it to suck any of that in, because there's moisture inside of your cylinder. But yeah, your dive center will be able to do that for you. Yeah, it's strictly 3 months is your time limit between when you get an air fill and when you actually take the cylinder in. Nitrox, I think, is even worse, because you've got higher percentages of oxygen, so any moisture, steel, oxygen, is going to create rust, so you get less times, and I think it can separate as well, so you almost need to stir the gas inside of the cylinder if it's been left for too long, because it can settle. But yeah, if it's breathing gas, it's better just to err on the side of caution, and just give it 3 months. If it's anything over that, drain it down. If you're doing some diving and you know you're going to have some time off, like for the Christmas period or the winter period where it's cold, you know you're not going to be diving for a few months, just leave your cylinder at like 50 bar, whatever it is that you exited the water at. Don't get a fresh air fill unless you know you're going to need it, because those lower pressures are going to be better, and it's going to like reduce the like chemical reaction rate and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, but if it's a completely full cylinder, yeah, 3 months, and then drain it and get some fresh air. Any other questions, pop them down in the comment section underneath this video. Use this Askmark hashtag to get it featured in the up and coming video. Remember to head over to our website, degrade.com. Like, share, subscribe, do all that good YouTube stuff. Thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, safe diving.